Welcome to the AxeCast podcast. Conversations with interesting people from the world of Acadia athletics and more, talking about their lives, successes, and failures. And now let's join hosts Len Hawley and Eric Cedarberg for the next 15 to 20 minutes as they dive into the life of today's guest.
Hey, this week on our AxeCast, we are joined by a member of the Acadia Sports Hall of Fame who was inducted in 2011, a familiar face for 2 decades, patrolling the sidelines of women's soccer and, of course, courtside, running the women's basketball program. Laura Sanders is with us this week. Laura, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Len. Good to see you again.
Great to have you on here. And you know what? We always like to sort of retrace people's steps. So I'm going to ask you to sort of dive into your memory bank a little bit here. You're originally from New Brunswick and you played varsity sports at another university. Just give us a little bit of your background before coming to Acadia.
I played basketball basically and volleyball and, track and field, those types of things in school. And then went on to university. I went to UNB in Fredericton and played 5 years of varsity basketball there. And following that, my first job was at a college, now university, Cape Breton University, was College of Cape Breton at the time. I was there for 3 years and then made my way to Acadia.
You come from a sports family, Laura?
Not really, Len. My parents, neither one of them really took an interest at all in sports. They were, hardworking people. And when I was in school, neither one of them had seen me play, not even once. And when I went to university, my high school coach at the time brought them to one game. That's the only time they ever saw me play. And I was just intrinsically motivated. My first exposure to, aside from intramurals, but I was from a rural community, and my first exposure was, intramurals. And then in junior high school, there was this gentleman that was a young teacher that had just graduated from UNB that was coaching basketball team. And I tried out and made it. And I don't know how it all happened, but very quickly I took a real interest in the game and was just intrinsically motivated. Spent a lot of time on my own, working on my game. And then going to high school, had a coach that played for UNB, the men's program at UNB. And I just went to camps and worked hard on my own and wanted to become a player. So no, no athletics really at all in my background.
And you know what? This is always hard for people to do, but if you were going to give us a scouting report on Laura Sanders, what kind of player were you?
High school, I think better than average. University, I was a solid player in university, and I don't think, I played for the New Brunswick provincial program, was a captain on that team, and when I was at university, I was an all-conference one year, but I would say a solid university player.
Now, Laura, I've known you for a long time, and you'll remember our old days of me being the PA announcer in the gymnasium when you're at Acadia. You were a vocal coach and you were an intense coach. Were you a vocal and intense player?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Played for a coach for 4 years that she had just come back from the Olympics, and our program was ranked top 5. Pretty much my 5 years that I was there, we were constantly striving to achieve, ideally a national championship was the dream. And but we were very competitive within the conference and throughout the country. We never did. I think the closest we came was maybe third one time, but never was able to get over that top. But certainly she was a wonderful role model. Joyce Slip, who does a lot of the commentary still in the AUS today, and her husband Dick was the assistant coach. So she was a tremendous role model. She ran a very disciplined, well-organized program, and we were very cohesive as a group. And I very much I very much enjoyed being a part of a team. And I'm an only child, so for me that was huge in my growth and development as a person. And without any question, they were very big influences in terms of how I saw a team should grow and develop. They were terrific influences in my playing days.
Laura, as soon as you said an Olympian right away, I was like, is she talking about Joyce? And then when you said that, it's like, and I just realized now, it's like, I just realized you had her as a coach and then you coached against her.
That's right.
So did you coach like her? Did you find that you kind of, some of your character as a coach was similar to hers, or was there anybody that influenced you a lot as a coach?
I think there was a number of people, Eric, but certainly my high school coach and my university coaches would be my greatest influences, I would think. Joyce was definitely not as verbal as I was. She was certainly as intense. Her husband complimented the coaching staff extremely well. And so, yeah, I mean, I grew a great deal from her. And or a great deal from them, I should say. And going into at the university level, did a lot of professional development, went to a lot of coaching clinics and that type of thing. So certainly, there's a lot of strong influences that way also. And I have to make mention, because anybody that was with me at Acadia know, Dave Nutt Brown was a terrific mentor as well. There's no question.
I wasn't going to mention that. Didn't want to.
No.
Yeah, you arrived here in 1980. Oh, sorry, Laurie, go ahead.
Yeah, he was a terrific friend and a strong mentor as well.
Well, you arrived here in 1984. So just prior to us talking about your years at Acadia, at what point did you wake up one morning and go, you know what, I think I'd love to be a coach? Where along the lifeline of Laura Sanders did you say, I think I'd like to coach?
I recall in university in my second year, I went to university like a lot of young people do, not really knowing what I think I wanted to do with my life. I was enrolled in education with a major in physical education and thought the route for me was probably going to be a teacher, in which would enable me to coach. But by my second year of university, I said, my dream would be to have a job like Joyce. Yeah, I said it, I never voiced it really. I just thought of it inside. And as it turned out, I played for 5 years. In my fifth year, one of my teammates' sister was coaching in Cape Breton at the college. And she was a good friend of mine. And she said, hey, Laura, why don't you apply for this job? And I said, I don't have any coaching experience. She said, no, just for the fun of it, go ahead and apply. I did and got that job and had a lot of early success down there. And the rest is history. Once I got into it, after my first year, I realized like, wow, this is what I really want to do. Never thinking that opportunity was going to be on my doorstep that quickly. I just really thought that, the avenue for me in those days would have been become a teacher first, similar to my high school coach who coached, various sports, maybe coach some provincial teams, and then look to possibly move into a college or university setting. And as it turned out, I was fortunate enough at a young age to be accepted for this position in Cape Breton, and it entailed coaching women's soccer and basketball. So it was perfect.
That's the $64,000 question that I think I'm going to let Len ask.
Yeah.
Because I think it's on the end of my tongue. I just so I'm going to let Len ask the question and see if it's the same as what I'm thinking right now.
Sure.
Yeah, you opened the door for us, Laura, talking about soccer and basketball. And of course, when you arrived at Acadia in 1984, you coached both programs. Women's soccer was not a varsity sport until a few years later, correct?
That's right. Yeah. The gentleman who hired me at Acadia was James Bear. And he indicated to me after I was hired that, I was hired to coach field hockey and women's basketball at Acadia. But he did indicate indicate to me quietly that women's soccer was definitely a sport that more than likely was going to become a varsity sport in the near future. Would I be, interested at all in somehow keeping that afloat? And that first year, maybe year or two, I ran early morning practice for women's soccer, which was a club status at that time, and then coach field hockey in the fall and basketball in the winter. A couple of years after that, of course, field hockey phased out, and women's soccer came on the scene. So the timing was perfect in terms of I ran the club program very much like a varsity program. Some of the athletes I had coached in Cape Breton transferred to Acadia. So initially there were 2 or 3 players who were used to my coaching style and had good buy-in. So that was sort of the foundation in which things would grow.
So Laura, are you our last field hockey coach?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
The person who has to keep records, I'll make note of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, Laura, because we talk about both sports. And of course, as you talked about, in high school and then at UMB, you played basketball and, played very well at both of those levels. And then at Acadia, and I got to be very careful how I frame this, your notoriety is about the women's soccer program, a sport that you didn't play, but had more success with. Just talk about that.
Yeah, very, very interesting, Len. I just, I reflect back upon some of that, and in coaching, the part of it is coaching, and a large part of it is the players that are there for you. Of course, I'll just step back for before we get into Acadia soccer. When I was in Cape Breton, my first real exposure to coaching soccer, there was a gentleman within the community that played varsity soccer for Dalhousie, and he was a phys ed teacher there. That the athletic director at the college, they aligned us, and I learned a tremendous amount from him. His name is Ronnie Shaw, and he is now the assistant coach of the men's basketball program at CBU. But anyway, so I learned a great deal from him. Had a lot of early success there. It's really funny. I mean, there were some terrific athletes that came into that program. We won a couple of regional championships. Then when I came to Acadia, it was just, I enjoyed it. I tried to surround myself with more people with a strong soccer background, which I was fortunate to be coaching the provincial program with a gentleman named Terry McDonald, which was the coach of Dalhousie women's soccer at the time. Learned a lot from him. And anyways, it turned out there was just, there was talent. I mean, I think in 86 was our first regional championship. It was held at St. Mary's, I recall that. And on that roster, there were people like Judy Farrell, who transferred from College of Cape Breton. She was Athlete of the Year at Acadia for a couple of years. Not a real well-known name, but is going to be someone that I recommend for Hall of Fame because she definitely is very deserving. She was in the midfield with her and Gun. They were a great tandem. So that was early on in 1986. We ended up losing that regional championship to St. Francis Xavier because Gun slipped and fell because she had improper footwear on the turf, and so missed a wide open net. So anyway, we learned a hard lesson from there. But anyway, the next year, 1987, there was a national championship, and it was held at Concordia. And I think the summer of 85, 86, I was coaching provincial program, and Janice Kosser, made that team. Her and Gun became very good friends, and on she comes. She transfers, I think it was from St. Mary's or Dalhousie. She played both of those schools, but anyway, down she comes to Acadia, and that was really the beginning of some very strong talent, and we just ran with it.
Yeah, no question. And you know what? And I'm glad you raised her name because I had planned to ask you about Gun Balderson because obviously when people think about women's soccer, just tell us about Gun as you remember her, the person, and obviously the great player she was.
Yeah, how I first met Gun was through her. He was a teacher at KCA in Kentville. He just came to the gym one day. His name was Nars Anlin, and said, Laura, there's a player at our school. She's originally from Iceland, and she's a terrific player. I think you should go watch her play. So I did. I remember it was at a little tiny soccer field in Kentville. I watched her for about 3 to 5 minutes, and I'm going, wow, like what a terrific. At that time, she was able to do things that certainly within our conference, there were very few players that were able to do so. I mean, her ability to take on defenders, uh, she could just break down defense on her own. So, she was coming to Acadia. I mean, I can't say that I recruited her. I mean, her family resided in Kentville. Uh, she was a strong student athlete. Education was paramount for her. Playing soccer was something that she loved to do. So it was a great fit. I lucked in to someone that was in my backyard, and really probably would have been a walk-on had Nar not come to my office that day and say, maybe you should go have a look at her and see what you think. And yeah, she was flamboyant. Everybody loved her. She had the ability to certainly make everyone around her better, and as a player, but as a person, she was very outgoing. Uh, People loved her, and I think I can honestly say in all my years of coaching, whether it be soccer, basketball, or field hockey, I've never coached an individual with that type of talent. I mean, she had a tremendous amount of physical talent. Academically, was very strong in school, and was a very strong music student. So just and she was a terrific person that drew people to her. And I mean, I can honestly say that I think people like Janice Kalisar, who after her playing days at Acadia became an assistant with our program, um, it was probably good. The attractiveness of the soccer program was strong, but I think Gun was a very strong draw for bringing certain players in.
Wow, I didn't realize how much you kind of built your program around Gun, and until now, like I've always known about her, but I didn't realize that it sounded like really she was the nucleus of your start.
Yeah, I mean, I think people use the word special a little bit, too much, but definitely was a very special person in that, uh, the legacy she left that program initially, but even now, with the tournament and all of those things, it was, I mean, that was a once of a lifetime thing, really, for a coach.
Of course,
Yeah.
as Eric said, critical to the nucleus of where the program is going to go. And tragically, we lost Gun in 1987. And the program, I'm sure that was a very tough time, Laura, coming back with the team. But as much as you're dealing with all of your and the girls' emotions at the time, you were still able to take that program and elevate it over the next few seasons, culminating, of course, with a national championship in 1990.
Yeah. Yeah. Len, I think that there's no question the foundation of that program was very solid. The mid to late 80s, the foundation was definitely firmly established, with people like Judy Farrell, Gun Balderson, uh, Janice Kalisar. Those kinds of people really established rock solid foundation. Uh, the culture had already been established. So by the time that we got to, the late 80s, early 90s, there were new athletes on the scene, like Wendy Wells, was a local athlete, a girl named Bridget Anakin who transferred from UNB, Jody Silk, who was in her, all of these players were now senior players in the program, Dara Ramirez, and then we had a very strong freshman crop come in that year. Cindy Montgomery, Cindy Ty now, Margene Layton, Claire Sargentson, another local player that we had was Kim McQuarrie. So, there was a nice mix of senior leadership, players that had been there for, 3, 4, 5 years. And we had gone to nationals, I think 3 or 4, 5 years, maybe consecutively. So they knew what to expect. And winning was something that they were easy to motivate, because they could see once we went to a national tournament that, we were right there. There was no reason why we could not win a national title. And then actually, the 1990 team that ended up winning, I don't think on paper was probably our strongest team. There was a couple of years prior to that was our strongest team on paper. We ended up winning silver. There really should be 2 gold medals hanging on the wall there, but unfortunately, I guess it's the way it goes. I mean, it's once you get to that semifinal or final game, things can go either way. And but yeah, I mean, there had been a very strong culture, that was built early on.
I want to morph into talking about the basketball program, which at the time was called the Axettes, like the women's soccer program. But one question for you: when you're at the varsity level of university, Laura, and you're coaching women's soccer, now granted the season would end around November, and that's when women's basketball, but how challenging is it? Because we all have to remember, you still have to recruit these student athletes to the university. How challenging is it to be a coach for 2 different programs?
Yeah, well, at the time, Len, I loved it. I didn't want to do anything really else with my life. So it was all consuming, but it, by the time March rolled around, I needed a bit of time to just sort of recover. But yeah, I mean, I loved it. It was a blast. You get worn down, of course, over the course of the year. And with soccer, we often went into the middle of November, because if you advance onto a national title, then you're into the middle of November. So your first half of your basketball season is, you're well into that as well. So by the time Christmas came along, the few days break that we had there was welcomed. I never even really thought of it at the time. I knew I was tired at the end of the year, but loved what I was doing. And yeah, it was all consuming.
Laura, I recall, I'm not sure when it was. It could have been 95, 96 when I first started working, and you going from a soccer game that finished in the late afternoon and scrambling through the building to get in your car to drive down to St. Mary's because you were in a basketball tournament.
Yeah,
I know. Just being a frenzy.
Yeah.
And everybody scrambling to do as much as we could to support Laura to get her to her next
But
game.
in all fairness, Eric, one of the people that I need to mention, because they were so instrumental in certainly helping to win the national title for soccer, was Janice. Janice Kossar, terrific athlete herself, played for the national team. She decided to stay on and be an assistant. And honestly, she was absolutely invaluable in the fact that there were many nights in which I would be leaving the soccer field, and you can say that, things were ablaze down there, because I was always, in terms of the demands that you were expecting from the players, you were constantly trying to get them to achieve beyond what they even thought they were capable of. So really pushing the limits to, get over the top to win that national title. Janice was so loyal and so terrific in her ability to be able to help players through that and help me through that, because I knew when I was leaving the field that there was a fire going on down there, but I had to go to the gym because basketball practice was starting in 15 minutes. But I knew that I had left her with with some issues, but I knew she was going to handle them. And she honestly was a very big factor in us winning the title. I think any of the players would attest to that. Not her relationship with the athletes off the field was one thing, but they respected her. They respected her as you know, we were a unit. We were a definite unit in terms of the coaching staff.
Perfect segue. So we're going to run from the soccer pitch and we're going to go into the gymnasium. And of course, we mentioned that you were also the coach of, at the time, the Axettes basketball program. So talk about that experience, because maybe in terms of the wins and losses and championships, not as successful as the women's soccer, but just talk about that culture and that experience, Laura.
Well, my attitude towards coaching was no different in terms of whether they were winning or whether, you know, sometimes you grew more from a situation in which your losses. I must say it was tough at times, tough in that the demands and the expectations of the players that for on the court were exactly the same as what I was doing on the field. 1990 was one of the years that we came very close to winning an AUA, what was AUAA at the time, and now AUS championship. So that year of 1990 for both women's soccer, which we won a national championship, and for women's basketball, where we lost, I believe we lost to St. Francis Xavier in the finals at UNB that year. But many terrific people that have gone on to be tremendously successful in in life, and I think the lessons that can be learned in a gymnasium, on a field, on a court somewheres, is invaluable to athletes later in life. Yes, you need your degree in order to be able to advance into your area in which you want to specialize in, but being a part of a team brings the sort of intangible in terms of the skills, being a cohesive part of a team, knowing how to deal with the highs and lows, and having a positive attitude, being resilient, all of those things. And so women's basketball, certainly that was always an area in which I felt bad about, because it's really was the sport in which I played. Wanted to win a regional and national championship in that sport as badly as I did in soccer. It just never happened for us.
You know what? You had some wonderful players that came to that program, and I think of Jennifer Lloyd, and I think of Lindsay Lamore, and I mean, I could go on and on and on.
Yep.
The list of people that played for you on the basketball court, and maybe not one banners, but I think you said it best earlier. Turned into wonderful people that have done great things since leaving Acadia.
Absolutely. I mean, there are numerous people. You look at Linda Speedy, Linda McKinnon now. I mean, she's gone on. She's vice president at Irving, JD Irving Limited in human resources. Patty Hayden. There's a number. Jennifer Lloyd. Yeah, it's gone. Jennifer's gone on to teach, and now she's doing extremely well in the refereeing circles. You've got Erin Mclean, who's now coaching at a university level. Very proud to see that. I mean, you like to think as a coach that you had a small part to play in that. You also know that many of those individuals came from grassroots programs in which people like, the Mike McKays, the Peter McAleenans, all of these high school coaches also contributed a great deal in terms of the growth and development of these individuals. But you're right, Bridget Edwards, there's numerous student athletes that came through women's basketball that are just, are doing tremendous in life.
Do you ever sit back and I know every once in a while I'll see you at a women's basketball game or a sporting event, and do you ever sit back, look at the athletes today, the coaching styles today, and say to yourself, would I be an effective coach today based on the way I coached 20 or 30 years ago?
Yeah, that's a hard one to answer, Len. I mean, certainly I think there's a lot of things that have changed in terms of how you coach in this day and age. But when it all comes down to it, it's a matter of inspiring and trying to get the most out of each and every individual. I just think maybe the approach is a little different. It's not as old school as we probably couldn't get away with quite as as much as maybe what we did in I don't know, 30 years ago. But certainly I see the coaches of today working extremely hard at their growth and development, as well as they're interacting with athletes. I mean, I think a big thing in competitive athletics for me is mental toughness, and that would be an area that, in terms of my coaching style, that I think that would be a tough one for me in this day and age, because to me, mental toughness is when we're talking about elite athletics or competing, is striving to give that extra 5%. So, I think all motivated athletes are willing to give you so much, but when you push that button to try to get that little bit extra, which I was continually doing, that would be an area that I would find, I think, extremely challenging in this day and age, just in terms of how to draw that little bit extra out of each individual player in order to be able to, to maybe make us achieve a little bit more than what even they think that they could achieve. And that's the part that I really enjoyed when I coached, is trying to get that little bit extra out of each and every athlete that maybe they didn't even think that they could draw out of themselves.
It's interesting you say that, and you know what, and fortunately in my travels at Acadia, getting to see alumni and meet with people that would have played for you 20, 30 years ago, and having conversations today, a lot of, and I think this is a great sign of respect, because they'll say, look, you know what, Laura demanded a lot of us. Sometimes she had to get in our face, but they sure appreciated the way that you coached them and the way that you treated them. And I think sometimes, Laura, if you come to a basketball game or a soccer game and you see one side of an individual, sometimes they don't always see the other side. And that other side was, you're a very caring person that made sure you looked after your student athletes.
Yeah, absolutely, Len. I mean, I think they all knew that I thought the world of them. And I think, one of the things that, when it's all said and done, whether it's you or I, or, there's teachers, there's coaches in our lives in which, you may not remember a whole lot about what they said to you or how they said it to you, but you do remember how they felt about you. And I think that's very true. To expect someone to give, that little bit extra above and beyond, they have to know that you care. And if they don't, I just don't think it may work short term, but it's certainly not going to last.
So for people that are tuning in, maybe don't keep in touch with you, where is Laura Sanders today after being out of the coaching circles?
Yeah, well, Len, I've been living in the Annapolis Valley for the past 4 to 5 years, and I had a short stint in Ontario for a year or two. I've sort of been, all over the place, but right now I'm in the Valley, and I've been doing a number of things since I've been coaching. One of is, buying properties and renovating or renting them and selling them and so on and so forth. That's been one of the things that I've been doing. I've done a little bit of refereeing basketball on the side, and for a short while I was doing a little refereeing of soccer as well, just to stay in touch with the youth. But yeah, I mean, life has changed quite a bit for me, and that, I've got my dogs now. I love my dogs and spend a lot of time with them, and yeah, I mean, life is good. It's but right now I'm in the Valley, and I'd love to hear from anybody I coached. If I'm not on Facebook or any of those types of things, so that makes it a little tough.
But you're on Zoom.
Yeah, a lot of national when the national tournament was at Acadia last, some of the players returned, and a couple of them encouraged me to get on Facebook. I haven't yet, but maybe someday.
Well, as Eric said, we got you on Zoom, so we're a step in the right direction.
Yeah, that's right. We're moving in the right direction.
This has been so much fun. You have your rightful place in the Acadia Sports Hall of Fame, inducted in 2011, and you've done so much for Acadia athletics in the 20 years that you were here. Thanks for doing this. And I know your former athletes and those that know you will certainly enjoy hearing you here today. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you, Len. Nice to see you, and thank you, Eric.